healing analogy in someone's consciousness, I immediately see it as my opportunity to awaken to oneness. And every great teacher and teaching that ever came along started off with someone who was ahead of the race. We say that Jesus is our way shower, that Buddha is our way shower. They help to show us what oneness looks like in the world by demonstrating it in their lives. They had an awakening, not unlike Thich Nhat Hanh, not unlike the Dalai Lama, not unlike Mahatma Gandhi. They came complete circle back from God is I am to God is I am. And it's all one. There is a oneness we all share. We all come from the one, even though we look like we're many. That's the gift of our teachers and their teachings. And every major world's religion started off with an enlightened being having that awareness, having that connection to the one. And they came back and told us in words, because that's all we have. They talked about everything's connected. We are one, no matter what it looks like. There is only one presence and one power in the universe. It is God is and I am and you are it. That's who you are. You are the one experiencing yourself as the many. And what happened, it's the same thing that always happens. The consciousness of the human mind gets caught in differences and gets lost in concepts. And so here was Jesus, here was the Buddha, here were other enlightened masters who had a particular understanding of what oneness looked like and came to manifest it and bring it into the world. And then other people began to get caught up in their own concepts about what they looked like or what it should feel like or how we should interpret it. And they began to pull things out of an original unifying principle and spirit of all-inclusiveness, of oneness regardless of the circumstances. And they began to add conditions. And they ended up with a teaching that no longer unifies, but what? Separates. That's what we see now. People using the same Bible quotes to prove that their judgmental look at and view of the world is real. And if you don't have that real feel for what they're believing, you're going to a place called hell. And by the way, I'll help you get there. Do you know that Adolf Hitler, if you read his biography, he believed he was doing the work of Christ by killing the Christ killers. Do you see how crazy it gets? Do you see how insane it becomes? When we do this, when we allow our God to become one of separation and fear and doubt, and ego loves that because ego is nothing more than an idea of being separate and apart. I'm not part of one. I'm one within myself. This is all that I am, and you're something other than. The book talked about that. From the first moment that we had the idea of other, our problem began. We're coming back to the one now, the one presence and the one power. And as we embody it, we begin to see it in all situations. With everyone that we meet, everybody then becomes our teacher to re-embody that oneness that we come from. That's the return of what's happening right now. And it's a great time to be on earth because you can see the two sides, can't you? There are those who believe that their God is the only God. That there are people who believe that they're representing the final word. And anyone says to you, I've got the final word. I have the final message. This is it. Please, run the other way, quickly, because that's a delusion of ego mind. That's a delusion of separation and fear. If someone tells you their God is loving and kind and compassionate and generous, then you're following a path that reflects the original teachings of the original teacher. Say amen to that.
Amen.
And that's what we're doing now. And really, literally, we're dividing the wheat from the chaff, or however that statement goes. There are those who are willing to see this oneness everywhere in the many, and there are those who are not. And we love and bless those who aren't, but we now are called more than ever to embody the truth that sets us free. We have to. That's our time now. We wouldn't be here if we didn't sign up to do this. And it's not the easier path. Guilt, shame, and blame, and projecting and rejecting parts of my shadow onto somebody else is the easier path, because everybody else is doing it. To be able to say, this is part of me. I own this in me, and not throw my shadow onto somebody else. What a huge difference this makes in the world and in the planet that we live on right now. I was having a meal with Phil, who's my stepdad, and it was the second meal we were together, and he's an atheist. And so he's sitting there with me, and he sort of leans across, the table, and he says, well, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in the God that people are going to war for and killing each other over. I've seen religion do awful things to people. I said, you know what, I'm an atheist too then. I don't believe in that God either. That God is a false God. That God does not represent the teachings of the ones that we have been following, Maureen and I, for all these years. It's a distortion of an original divine idea to help us join, not separate, not find reasons to disagree, not find reasons to go to war with each other. I don't believe in that God either. The path we have been following, Maureen and I, for 40 years, to the small degree that we have, and 20 years he's known about that, Phil, he's seen us, has helped us become more loving, more kind, more compassionate, more generous, and actually happier. And Phil has seen that in us over the 20 years. And that's a mind stopper when you see it, because by the fruits they shall know you. And so the fruit of our practice has been to be more loving, more kind, more compassionate, and happier. And he's seen that. He's gotten it. You see, in that moment, the fruit of the sweetness of spirit through your practice of who you are. Not what you say you believe, but how you live it in your life then becomes the sweet nectar that others can take a bite from. Mother Teresa said it this way, and I love this quote so much. Live in such a way that those who know you but don't know God will come to know God because they know you. Live in such a way that those who know you but don't know God will come to know God because they know you. You're the only Bible some people are ever going to read. You let your life testify to that, and everything changes. And so in that moment, Phil, the atheist, got it, but he wasn't done yet, because he was trying to sort of put a little hole in the armor and find somewhere where the thought system fell apart. Does anybody relate to that? When you get in these conversations about spiritual things, people look for ways to get you. Then he said, okay, well, I got that one fruit. Yeah, very good. You guys are loving kind. What about heaven and hell? He said. You guys believe in heaven and hell? And I said, well, yeah, we do, but we interpret it differently. And then I told them a story that many of you already know already. The story of a famous samurai who was the best samurai in all the land. This guy was super fast, super bad, super amazing. He could cut 15, 20 people apart in no time fast. He was the greatest samurai master who ever lived. He feared no man, and every man feared him. And he had this training for years and years and years of practice, practice, practice. But something inside of him, like with you, knew that with all that he knew, there was so much he didn't know, and he wanted to know more. And so he goes to a monk, a master Zen monk, a teacher, and he bows before him and he says, I would like to become your student. I want to learn the truth. And he says, well, what do you want to learn? He said, well, I want to know the difference between heaven and hell. He says, well, I'll take you on as a student, okay? But first of all, look what you look like. You are the most ridiculous looking being I've ever seen. You're fat, you've got a knot on top of your head, and what's with the sword? And your breath is foul, and your hair looks awful, and everything about you is wrong. You want to come into my teachings, and look at you, you're despicable. There's nothing about you that I like. This is not going to work. And all of a sudden, the samurai takes out a sword like this, boom, and he's ready to slice him right in half with this sword that can just go through thin paper. And the master looks up and said, that's hell. He takes his sword, puts it back in again, and he says, that's heaven. He bows, and for the rest of his life, he followed that teacher. Heaven and hell does not exist outside of ourselves. If you want to know your inner Christ, you better be aware of your inner Hitler. If you want to know the light, you better be familiar with your shadow, because the two of them walk hand in hand. together. And when you own that in yourself, you're less likely to project it onto another because you've become familiar with it in you. And then you can be more compassionate in the world. So we went and visited Rhoda, my mother in Naples. Rhoda, she's my favorite Zen master teacher, Rhoda. And so we're sitting about the third day, and we're having a little cocktail, and everything's relaxed. Everybody's guard is down. You know how when you get that way, finally everybody sort of drops the facade, and you're just hanging out and having a good time. And we're just sitting there, everybody's relaxed, and Maureen just casually says to my mom, so, Rhoda, you're 86 years old. What would you have done different in your life? You know, if you had a choice, well, what would you have done different if you had a choice? Oh, she said, I absolutely would have had no children whatsoever. None. None. No children, no marriages, no 3 men, nothing. And I'm like, oh, Mom, what? And Mom, what about the grandkids? And Maureen, you never would have met her. But that was my mother. She was doing what my mother does. You ask her a question, and she gives you her answer. She's always been that kind of teacher, bringing me the moment of heaven or hell. Right there. Lesson summation point number 4. Remember, another person's problems are just their problems. If you get upset, defensive, and angry, it's just become your problem.
Say that again.
Can I say that again?
Yes.
Another person's problems are their problems. If you become defensive and angry and argumentative, guess what? It's just become your problem. We asked my mom a question, and guess what my mom did? She gave her answer. Heaven or hell is not about what she did or didn't do. Heaven or hell is about what I choose to do with what she just said in that moment. And how I react or contract is my choice, not hers. Don't ask me if you don't want to know, was what my mother would say. So we're sitting at dinner a little later on. My sister, Lisa, is with me, 3 years older. And she's saying, you know, what is with now? For 16 years, my dad has died, all the money went to somebody else. You've heard all that. And why are we suddenly now, 16 years, having heard nothing about any of the money, are we now getting, for 3 months in a row, a big manila envelope filled with what's left in the account of Alvin H. Levy, which is absolutely nothing. There's nothing. We may owe him money by the time they get done with this account. There's nothing there. Why are we getting this? My sister says to me, and she's getting hotter and her veins are popping out. I said, to give us a lesson in heaven or hell. And that's the choice you and I get over and over and over again. What you choose to do with each moment is creating either your heaven or your hell. And our relationships with flesh on give us that opportunity over and over and over again. I wanted to share with you a story in closing here, getting towards the end of this chapter. And it's sort of at the end of the book, but it describes what we've been talking about as relationships as a tool for awakening. High teachings from our greatest adversaries. And by the way, you're somebody's greatest adversary, by the way. They're talking about you in some church service right now. They're sitting on some couch with some Indian psychologist talking about the problem that you are in their life. In the great Hindu epic, the Ramayana, the bad guy, or satanic figure, is Ravinya. He is a horrific, demonic being with 10 heads and 20 arms. Maybe you've seen him. His greatest adversary is Rama, an incarnation of God. Ravinya resolves that the most evil thing he can possibly do is to steal God's wife, Sita. He kidnaps her, takes her to his palace in Lanka, and endeavors to seduce her. But Sita wants no part of him. God is her partner. Why would I want an imposter like you, Ravinya? What is most fascinating about this long, long tale that goes on, if you ever see it, it goes on for hours, about the Ramayana, is that at the end, here's it now, here's the point. At the end, you don't need to wait till the end now, but at the end, we discover that Ravinya is actually a high yogi who became caught in what is known as the golden chain, a kind of spiritual paradox in which an individual becomes so attached to being good that the ego forms an encrusted identity that prevents it from becoming fully enlightened. In Ravinia's case, the only thing he can do to get free is to take an incarnation as the baddest of all bad guys, the essence of evil. Don't you see that even the most horrific human being on earth is still a being of light, a manifestation of the One? The great blessing beings like Jesus and Buddha and Mother Teresa and Gandhi bring to us into the world is that they demonstrate what we can be when we're at our best. Beings like Hitler and Osama bin Laden show us what we can be when we're at our worst. Let there be no doubt that every one of us has the capacity to go in either direction. We go in the direction of darkness when the qualities of self-righteousness, separation, and fear are allowed to predominate, when they're not balanced with compassion and mercy. Maureen was just listening to a debate between Ron Paul was there and Rick Perry, is that the other guy's name? And the question was asked from the moderator. So what about somebody who either opted out of health care or can't afford to buy in? What if they're sick and need help, but the medical model can help with? What do we do with them? And he said, let him die. Let him die. And the applause from the audience, everybody started clapping. One step away from, you know what I'm saying? That's the worst qualities in us. And probably all those people go to church and believe they're good followers of the good word. And the truth is, that's what happens when we're not allowing ourselves to be filled with the light. And I have got that tendency in me, and I've got to watch out for it all the time. We go in the direction of light when we awaken to the unifying qualities of love, forgiveness, kindness, compassion, and mercy. And every time we do the inner work of seeing that this and this are a choice, we bring in that moment a little bit of heaven right here now on earth. And that's why you're here, listening to these very difficult teachings that don't project your unresolved issues and tissues onto others, but help you own it yourself. And when you do that healing work, the many become one in you. So let's just do our lesson summation. We'll slice it up a little more and we'll be done. My human consciousness is capable of knowing the One, seeing the One, and being the One. Isn't that sweet? Let's say that together. My human consciousness is capable of knowing the One, seeing the One, and being the One. You know why? Because you are the One. How many saviors will it take to heal the planet? They asked Jesus in the Course in Miracles. He says, Uno! One, you. You. Two, we all sit before Lord Shiva in the form of our parents, our partners, our children, our boss, our governmental leaders. Whether they are kind and loving or argumentative and inconsistent and irrational, we can take their teaching as a blessing in disguise. Do not hear me saying, stay in an abusive relationship. Run the other way from that. Number three, in our practice, we are called upon to welcome the fire of purification when they touch those uncomfortable places within us of guilt, anger, fear, and judgment. I should wish to have 1,000 set of moth's wings to burn away one set a day to awaken. Yes, please. Remember, this is this one you'll use this week. Another person's problems are just their problems. If you get upset, defensive, and angry, it has just become your problem. Live in such a way that those who know you but don't know God will come to know God because they know you. You are the walking Bhagavad Gita. You are the walking Tao Te Ching. You are a walking teacher of the Christ consciousness. And how do I know that? Because you practice perfectly? Absolutely not. But because you're willing to have not walked out on these teachings. We are needed right here and right now to do this work. To heal and awaken the sacred within all beings is our joy, our journey, and our practice. Thank you for being willing to do just that. Namaste.